This week on Jerusalem Dateline, we're in Iraqi Kurdistan. Just a few miles away, a radical Muslim army takes more ground by the day. Refugees here seek protection, while the region's Christians fear the worst. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you from Erbil in northern Iraq. Islamic militants have rolled up city after city in recent days, and now ISIS has its sights set on Baghdad. But here in northern Iraq, its security forces have kept the area safe. That's why many Christians and other refugees have come to this area for protection. Thousands of Iraqi families have fled the fighting and come here to Erbil. They fled the bloodbath left in the wake of the ISIS lightning strike across northern and central Iraq. It's unlikely that ISIS will turn north because they'd face a formidable military foe in the Kurdish military. They call themselves the Peshmerga, which literally means those that face death. It's a key time for the region, and especially here for the Kurdish people. They face a historic crossroads and the very real possibility they could declare themselves an independent state. But like the rest of Iraq, they face an uncertain future. With the U.S. seeking to disengage from the international arena and the rest of the international community unwilling to intervene, Iraq could face some of its most difficult days ahead. Throughout its campaign, ISIS has targeted Christians. That's why many have fled here to northern Iraq for protection, but they still fear the jihadist group. We visited one frightened Christian community just miles from the front lines. We left the friendlier confines of Erbil heading towards the historic area of Nineveh, now known as Mosul, home to some of Iraq's besieged Christians. Our guide, Pastor Majid, brought us as far as the Kurdish army, called a Peshmerga, would let us go. This is about the end of the line if you don't want to run into ISIS. We've been told they control the mountains behind us right now, and a few kilometers down the road you'd run into an ISIS checkpoint. This is the town called Bartilla. It has about 25,000 Christians in it, but we couldn't find one that would talk to us on camera because they're afraid of retribution. The conditions here are abysmal. There's no water because ISIS has turned it off, and no electricity because the Maliki government has turned that off. They are protected by the Peshmerga, who have set up a perimeter around this town and a few other towns around here. Without that, they know that ISIS would come in and kill most of the people here. They're asking for prayer for Christians around the world, and one Christian leader told me, just like the Apostle Paul asked for prayer, they're asking for prayer that God will protect this town and this region. Bartilla lies just a few miles from Nineveh, or Mosul, the first major victory for ISIS just days ago. We found the town nearly deserted. While Christians in the town wouldn't be seen on camera, we talked to one of the house church leaders. On our way back to the Kurdish capital, Erbil, Pastor Majid relays what he said. He told us when ISIS captured Nineveh, they gave Christians three choices.
They are not allowed to open their churches, and even if they opened, they are going to burn the churches. And also the Christians being asked to pay the tax. If not, they can leave Nineveh, and if they didn't left and they didn't pay the tax, they should give their heads.
When you say give their heads, you're talking about being beheaded?
Yeah.
In the midst of this cauldron surrounding them, this church leader sent out a prayer SOS.
Raise up prayers for us. This is what we need. When man is praying, God is working. So it is important for the churches outside Iraq to raise up prayers and also to fast for the sake of the people of Iraq.
ISIS has brutalized Christians in both Syria and Iraq. We spoke with author Tom Doyle in Jerusalem about this, and he talked about their horrific tactics and how he called on Christians around the world to pray for the church in Iraq. Tom, how can people in the West pray for the believers right now, and especially in Iraq?
Well, you know, right now in Mosul, and this is in the ancient area of Nineveh, we know of maybe 1,000 Christians there, could be more, could be less, but definitely in harm's way. We know some of the underground churches where there are Muslim background believers that have come to faith in Christ are definitely going underground. But there's a strategy there that this group ISIS, that was a split off from Al-Qaeda, much too extreme for Al-Qaeda, if you can imagine, that is doing very much like Hamas did in Gaza, trying to win the favor of the people. So what we're even hearing today, Chris, is that some of the ISIS terrorists are escorting Christians places. They've even taken some nuns on errands to try to show people we're here for good reason, we're humanitarian. The problem is this could be their shields in the future when the attack happens, and definitely it's most going to be Sunni-Shia conflict. I think this is really the launching pad for it. It's not ultimately what they want. The battle's going to be for Baghdad.
Yeah. What are you hearing from the Christians right now in Iraq?
Well, you know, there's been some miraculous escapes. We just heard of one believer today that came out of Islam that is following Jesus, that his family took and pronounced that they were killing him. And actually, God put some compassion in their heart. They opened the back door and let him go free. He's safely now in another city, so we praise the Lord for that. We're hearing enormous pressure, and believers are saying they feel that they're just minutes away from conflict. They hear it outside. They know it's not going to take long until it turns on them as Christians.
How bad is this group ISIS, and what have they been doing in Syria?
I mean, some of the things that they've done in Syria are so inhumane. The only way we can describe it is that it just comes from the pit of hell. And we're seeing the Christians being nailed to the crosses, decapitated. They pronounced the week of Easter, we will wash the streets in Christian blood. And there was some massive killings. 7 new believers were beheaded together. They stood strong for Christ. They did not back down from their faith. And they were killed just a couple of days before Easter.
Yes. And what is their goal? What do they want to do?
Well, ultimately, they want a caliphate, is what they want. They want that Sunni triangle locked down so that can be the base of their operations, and they want to go after Baghdad. And then, of course, in Syria, they want to oust Bashar Assad and get rid of him. And when you think about Iraq and Syria, if that were to happen, that they would come together under these groups, these Sunni terrorist groups, there's no question that it would be a massive regional war, because they won't want to stop there. We know that ultimately they have their sights on Jerusalem.
Why Jerusalem?
Oh boy, the ultimate conquest, the Jews' holy city, for them to be able to say, it's ours, to get rid of them would be the ultimate validation statement for the religion of Islam.
And as ISIS heads toward Baghdad, as you mentioned, it's setting up a potential huge conflict in the Middle East?
Yeah, and when you think about it, really, it's, in a sense, it's a proxy war, because it is all of Shia Islam against Sunni Islam. It's just not these two groups in Iraq. Right. It really is virtually, Chris, a regional war, as we know who Saudi is backing and who Iran is backing. So it's just kind of a half step away from a global conflict between Shia and Sunni Islam. It's just localized in one country. But it looks like it could spread pretty easily.
Yeah, you're writing a book now that seems very timely. What's the book?
It's called Killing Christians, Living the Faith Where It's Not Safe to Believe. And so we're writing about the overcomers, people in the midst of the persecution. Some of them are alive today, some of them lost their lives, but how they lived for Christ passionately day after day are things that we can learn. So it's 10 stories. We get a chance to just kind of sit at their feet for a little bit and learn from them. One man said this when he was in Evan prison, it was his seminary experience. It was just him and Jesus in that cell. He said, I wouldn't trade those days for anything. So is Jesus enough during those times? Absolutely.
Yeah, what can we learn from them?
Boy, we can learn that our whole focus has to be on where we are on God's time clock right now. We believe the days are getting short, and Satan knows his days are numbered. That's why this persecution is ratcheted up. So it's time for us to put away our schedules, our plans, be wholly devoted to what the Lord wants to do through our lives each day.
Right. Anything you'd like to add, Tom?
You know, I would just say to the believers that watch CBN 700 Club and are so passionate about praying, just anytime you see something on television, if you would, remember that it's not just Mosul, it's just not ancient Nineveh. You have brothers and sisters there in Christ that are living in some of the most dangerous conditions in the world. Pray for them. So use that little ticker tape that goes across Syria, Iraq, as a prayer prompter to remind yourself to pray for them. And then also, if they want daily updates, we have our 838 Facebook page that daily we're getting requests from believers on the front line saying, could we call the troops to pray about this?
Amen.
Coming up, what is ISIS and how did it rise to power?
Pat Boone here with a word about bank safety. Do you think your money is safe in the bank? Don't bank on it. A generation ago, bank accounts felt secure and they paid interest. This encouraged the virtue of thrift and saving. But today, bank accounts pay virtually nothing, and they've shifted from low risk to high risk. For example, did you know your money deposited in most U.S. banks could be subject to limited withdrawal and even confiscation? Oh yes, and that's just the first of 19 risks explained in a new white paper entitled Don't Bank on It. You still think your bank deposits are safe? You better get this vital new Don't Bank on It white paper now. Call the number on the screen or visit SwissAmerica.com, the gold standard. Learn how simple it is to become your own banker today.
Millions of Americans with an ostomy live their lives to the fullest every day. And over the last 10 years, thousands have chosen Liberator Medical as their caring and reliable resource for ostomy supplies. Liberator Medical is a nationally accredited Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance provider, so we can handle all your Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance paperwork and billing. And Liberator Medical has been chosen as a preferred supplier by all the leading ostomy manufacturers, including Coloplast, Hollister, Convatec, and Generics. We supply all these leading ostomy brands so you can always get the ostomy supplies and accessories you want and trust. And all of our ostomy care specialists are product certified by the manufacturers. Shipping is free and discreetly delivered right to your door. Unhappy with your present ostomy supplier? Call Liberator Medical and ask about our free ostomy sampling program. We also offer catheters and urological supplies.
Call 1-800-513-3076. That's 1-800-513-3076.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm George Thomas. We're taking a pause from Chris's reporting in Iraq to explore some of the deeper questions surrounding this crisis. For example, who is this radical group ISIS and what does it hope to accomplish? Who are the forces behind them? And how will this affect U.S. policy in the Middle East as well as the region's Christians? Joining me here on set is CBN senior editor John Wagi. From Washington, D.C., our terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck, and in Jerusalem is Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl. Eric, let me begin with you. Who is ISIS and what are their goals?
Well, ISIS, George, stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Very interesting how this has all played out. They started out back in 2003 as Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They were Al-Qaeda's Iraq branch, George, and basically over the years it morphed. This group was pretty much dead around 2007 with the surge in Iraq of U.S. troops. And then in around 2010, they started to rear their head in Iraq again. They became stronger and stronger. Long story short, last year, they had become so strong, they broke away from Al-Qaeda, rebranded themselves ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Al-Qaeda then disowned them, said, hey, these guys are too violent and too brutal and extreme, even for us. And what they've done, George, is they've been able to conquer large territory in Syria, in Iraq, in the heart of the Middle East. They're more like a terrorist army. To conquer such territory, really unprecedented, and they are known, George, for their savagery, their vicious, burning churches to the ground with worshipers inside. These guys are psychopathic killers. If they weren't in the battlefield in the Middle East, they'd be on death row here in America or someplace else for killing a family just for the fun of it. That's the mentality you're dealing with right now.
John, to you, is there a larger conflict at work here?
Well, yes, George, there's a conflict on top of a conflict on top of a conflict. You have the Sunni versus Shiite battle that's going on in Iran between the Syrian forces of ISIS and others. And then you have nations involved, Saudi Arabia, Iran, they're at cross purposes. And so you have that going on. Turkey wants a role in all of this because they're about to expand their empire if they get any shot at it. And then on top of that, you have an even larger war, which is Sunni
and Shiite versus the whole non-Muslim world. And that's where the United States comes in. And George, this is one of the things that's most disturbing, is that you have the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, saying this is an Iraqi problem. This is just a problem that they can work out amongst themselves. And the problem is that they are at war with us, have been at war with us since at least 2001. And this is something we're not going to escape from. U.S. interests are at stake in the heart of this whole battle.
To you, Julie Stahl in Jerusalem, John Kerry says the U.S. Earlier this week, he said the U.S. is open to working with Iran to help Iraq. What does that mean for Israel?
You know, the Israeli officials are pretty much staying quiet on the whole issue of ISIS and the possibility that Iran and the U.S. might team up to fight ISIS in some kind of way or talk about being together. But we could imagine that they would not be happy at all about that. Netanyahu was very upset in the fall that the U.S. and the other nations were willing to talk to Iran to try to convince them about their nuclear program. I can't imagine how it wouldn't affect the nuclear talks if the U.S. would be talking to Iran, and therefore it would not play out good for Israel.
Eric, to you in Washington, D.C., you know, it's interesting because back in 2003, the United States had high hopes that Iraq would turn into a stable democracy in the Middle East. George Bush said that what was going on in Iraq, our involvement in Iraq, would be a blueprint, that the winds of democracy would flow not just from Iraq, but across the large swath of the Middle East. What went wrong?
Well, George, I think, number one, there is absolutely no history at all whatsoever of any form of democracy in the Middle East. There has never been a democracy in the Middle East other than Israel. Surprise, surprise. There's also the Islam factor where, look, in Islamic countries, you traditionally do not have democracy. Many people think that Islam and democracy are not compatible. The Muslim peoples of the Middle East have to show that they want democracy, genuine democracy. Yes, we saw Iraqis at the polls. Everyone remembers the purple fingers they held up, George, but that has not been sustained. And now this group, ISIS, in some of the Sunni areas of Iraq, have been treated as liberators. And they're an extremely anti-democratic force, to say the least. We saw in Egypt the Muslim Brotherhood elected. We've seen other Islamist parties elected in the Middle East, George. Yes, the Muslim Brotherhood was pushed out of power, which is a promising sign. The promise of that, George, is, okay, people are electing these Islamist governments, supporting the Islamist governments, but once these radical Islamists get in power, George, their rule is a complete disaster, and the people chafe under this radical Islamic law and this Sharia law and this Islamic rule, and many times they rise up. That's what we've seen in the Arab Spring. We've seen it in Iran, but this has not, any kind of solid democratic movement has not been sustained in the region, and I don't see it being sustained anytime soon.
And the folks that are watching this, John, in the Middle East are serious Christians who are under incredible pressure. Many have fled that country. Iraqi Christians who fled to Syria, northern Iraq to escape persecution are now under fire. Where can they go? Are they going to the Kurdish region of the north of Iraq, or are they trying to come here to the United States?
All of the above, George. They really are in a tight situation. It's a tragedy. Eric related earlier how bad it is on the ground for Syrian and Iraqi Christians. The problem is if they try to go to Europe, they have to go through a middleman. It can cost up to $10,000 a person. Where are Iraqi and Syrian Christians going to get that kind of money? On top of that, you've got them threatening, the ISIS group is threatening to attack and kill English teachers. That's how bad the war is against the entire West. And so these people have a really difficult hurdle, and they know that if they're leaving, they're probably leaving permanently, at least for a long time.
Julie, to you, final few seconds on the broadcast. I wanted to take a moment to talk about the crisis that's affecting Israel right now. The IDF is scouring the West Bank in search of 3 Israeli teens. One is an American citizen believed kidnapped by Hamas. Tell us quickly what's happening.
That's right, George. Israel has taken this opportunity not only to look for the teens and search for the teens, they've doubled their manpower in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, to search for these teens. They are basically going building to building in certain areas. They've searched hundreds, like I think 900, 800 buildings. They've arrested 280 Palestinian suspects. Some 200 of them are Hamas. And they're really taking the opportunity to try to weaken Hamas and its power base in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. There's also been a lot of rocket fire from the Gaza Strip on Israeli communities in the south. Israel has responded with bombing those areas, those sites. There's also, we just got a notification that there was an explosion in a tunnel between Gaza and the West Bank. I don't know, we don't know exactly what that was all about, or between Gaza and Israel. Don't know exactly what that was all about, but we'll be finding that out.
Okay, Julie Stahl from Jerusalem, Eric Stackelbeck in our D.C. Bureau, and John Wagi here at the CBN News Desk in Virginia Beach. Folks, thank you so much. We have a lot of stuff going on. Please keep checking cbnnews.com for the very latest in the Middle East and around the world. Coming up, another humanitarian crisis looms because of the Middle East violence. Chris Mitchell takes us to Refugee Central in northern Iraq.
Attention sleep apnea patients. Are you tired of the expense and hassle of getting your CPAP and BiPAP supplies? Are you fed up with dealing with ill-fitting, leaking, or worn-out masks and straps? Are you worried about the effects that unsanitary tubes, cushions, and filters have on your health? If you said yes to any of these questions, Allied Medical Supply Network has the solution to your problems. You could qualify to have your supplies regularly delivered right to your door at little or no cost to you. That's right, no more inconvenience, no worn-out masks and straps, no more unsanitary equipment, just restful sleep. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today to determine if you may qualify to receive your fresh, brand-name supplies at little or no cost. Don't delay. Call us now to see if you are eligible to save money on regular delivery of your CPAP and BiPAP supplies. Call 1-800-815-9947. That's 1-800-815-9947. Or go to cpapsupplyhelpline.com.
Announcing an important breakthrough in healthcare that can benefit everyone. If you or anyone you love needs affordable health insurance, regardless of a pre-existing medical condition, call Quick Insurance 123 today and get the immediate relief you deserve. Quick Insurance 123 was created to provide affordable health insurance to all uninsured Americans, with or without pre-existing conditions. This is not a discount card. This is a real insurance program that lets you choose from many affordable health plans, with access to doctors, hospitals, emergency services, and more. So call the number on your screen now and get the health coverage you need, just for calling. As a special bonus, we'll send you a free prescription savings card that could save you up to 85% on your prescriptions. That's right, you could save up to 85% on your prescriptions just for calling. Call Quick Insurance 123 to find out how you can get affordable health insurance and receive your free prescription savings card just for calling. Don't wait. Getting a free quote is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Call today.
In wartime, human suffering can often be overlooked, even forgotten. But that's almost impossible here because hundreds of thousands of refugees have sought shelter in refugee camps throughout the region. The stunning blitzkrieg by ISIS left thousands of broken lives in its wake. This is one of the many refugee camps set up in the region. This one is just a few days old, and literally within the region, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced. This camp is about a 15-minute drive from the ISIS forces, and most of the people here are from the city of Nineveh. And many of the men and women, boys and girls, have seen the worst of the fighting.
I saw people without hats on the street, and people who have been killed in the streets. I saw this with my own eyes. When they got into Nineveh, they entered the houses and killed whole families. They don't care about the ages or the humanity. They only care about themselves.
That carnage drove these people away. Many refused to be interviewed by us on camera because, believe it or not, many expect to go back. Others, even some young teenage girls, told us ISIS would kill them if they returned. Now they have to adjust to another life.
In the region, according to the government, they said there was 100,000 coming to Erbil and 500,000 IDPs across the country. Yeah. But now this is a really serious crisis and a challenge for the whole Iraq. So we, international organizations, are here to support everyone who are in needs in this crisis.
Camp life reduces life to basics. People need water. They clamor for ice. Kids cool off in the 100-degree heat.
people fight boredom. Yet they did survive the butchery of ISIS. Shah Alan served in Iraqi intelligence and interviewed captured ISIS soldiers. He found out they have a larger agenda than Iraq.
We know that ISIS is not dreaming just to rule over Iraq, but they are dreaming to go to Europe and rule over all of the European continent. ISIS is dreaming to rule over the whole world.
The agenda of ISIS and this refugee camp are just two signs Iraq and the Middle East may never be the same, and like Humpty Dumpty, may never be put together again.
When we return, the Bible's perspective on the fighting in Iraq and Syria.
Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? Hi, I'm George Foreman. People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
InventHelp has been helping inventors for more than 30 years and has sales offices nationwide. InventHelp can provide patent referrals and submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new ideas. If you have an idea and want to try to patent it and submit it to companies, you should call InventHelp today for free information.
Listen, I can't guarantee a company will be interested in your idea, but I believe every inventor deserves the opportunity to step into the ring and take their best shot. Put InventHelp in your corner.
For your free inventors information, call 1-800-461-9290. That's 1-800-461-9290.
If you had a choice between going bald and a full head of hair, which would you choose? Advances in medical science have resulted in the world's first and only permanent solution to hair loss.
Yes!
You wash it, you cut it. It's your own real, naturally growing hair. When it comes to hair restoration, no one in the world has more experience than Bosley. The results look completely natural and are affordable on nearly any budget. But the entire process can't be explained in 60 brief seconds. So to find out more about this clinically proven and permanent solution to hair loss, call now to receive your free no-obligation information kit. It'll answer all of your questions about hair loss and hair restoration. Plus, we'll also send you this $250 gift certificate just for calling. Every day you wait, you're losing more hair. So don't put it off any longer. You owe it to yourself to find out the facts. Choose hair. Choose Bosley.
Call 800-868-9957. That's 800-868-9957.
Here in Erbil, the sun has already set and the lights of the city are coming on behind us. It's important to remember that these are the lands of the Bible. Not far away from here is the city of Nineveh, where the prophet Jonah preached a message of repentance. Today it's called Mosul, and that's the city that was captured by ISIS, the terrorist group. This is also the land of the Assyrians, and people here talk about Isaiah 19, a future prophetic promise, where a holy highway will stretch from here, Assyria, all the way to Egypt and through Israel. And many Christian leaders are calling for prayer around the world for the Christians here in Iraq, and especially for God's will to be done in this region. And despite all the turmoil going on, one Christian leader reminded us that God has the final word. Well, thanks for joining us on this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time in Jerusalem.